So back in the 1980s, if you knew nothing about the history of Big Ten football, Tony's got a smile on his face for some reason. I don't know. It's the way I set that up. I don't know. If you look back at the 1980s, Illinois took its shot. They were good for quite a bit of that decade going into the 90s. Michigan State, Iowa was extremely good for parts of the 80s, and Ohio State and Michigan, of course, and others. What happened to this conference after that? And Ohio State, if anything, the state of Ohio has lost high school talent. It's not what it was 3 decades ago. Why did Ohio State emerge from where they were playing football, 9-3 football with everybody for a decade, to just shoot to the top?
I think I think one theory I would say is the end of the triple option, and not just the triple option, but running the ball 75% of the time really hurt the Midwest teams, because then you spread them out more and they're slower, and they got taken advantage of, and they didn't get the athletes that other programs were able to. But you can hide that when you're playing against you've got 2 tight ends and a fullback and a running back on the field, and you're playing against a 4-4 defense. Like, athletes don't necessarily come into play as much as they do when you're spread out or just playing a base defense and you've got 3 receivers on the other side of you, and you're tested individually so many more places now, and even over the last 20 years, than you were way back when you had guys that were, you'd have 3 or 4 guys all around the ball, because the ball is just going right between the tackles. That's not the way it is anymore. And so I think that has hurt teams, hurt the Big Ten. And I guess we should all just blame Joe Tiller, since he brought that offense to the Big Ten.
And all things being equal, talking about, maybe, population shifts in terms of recruiting, bases moving, Ohio still is going to be the strongest of any state in the Big Ten footprint. I mean, because for all we want to sit there and say about Ohio seeing some kids move away, it's nothing like what Western PA has seen, so that dries a lot of stuff up there. Michigan has always kind of been hit or miss, and even when it has some top-end kids, it never is able to support the middle. So as we were seeing the game evolve a little bit in terms of bringing Joe Tiller in and getting away from some of those tried and true run as soon as you get off the bus type of methods, Ohio State was able to benefit from having talent in its state year in and year out, because even with the population shifts and Ohio State having to move to more of a national footprint in terms of its recruitment, it still can put together a pretty good team from within the state in terms of multiple positions. So, I think that Ohio State was just an early adopter in a lot of things. I think that Ohio State was able to benefit just from having enough talent here. And I mean, again, here in the class of 23, it's very different than what we saw in the class of 2018, which is very different than what we saw in the class of 2013. But when I got into this as an industry, as a professional industry in 2006, we were still looking at Ohio as being like the number 4 state in terms of talent producer, if not 4, number 5. And while now Ohio has fallen behind maybe North Carolina and some other states in that it's still a state that produces a lot of talent.
I look at it that late 90s, Ohio State became kind of a fashionable place, I think, and it's just kind of fed off of itself from that point on with Eddie George, and then the teams that they had that were really good there in the late 90s. And then obviously they win a national championship but upset Miami. And I think that caught everybody's attention, with Jim Tressel. And Tressel was great at recruiting Ohio, and Ohio was the backbone of a lot of those teams that he had. And yet he also went to places like Florida and California and Georgia and got guys that came in and contributed. And at the same time, Michigan was in a pretty good spot with Lloyd Carr, but then he leaves, and they were like 7 years through the wilderness, really, almost 15 years through the wilderness to get back to where they were with Lloyd Carr in 2006 when they were 1 versus 2 playing for a playoff or the BCS whatever. And then Notre Dame has been through different ups and downs. So within this footprint, Penn State had the Joe Paterno thing and the death penalty essentially thrown at it for a couple of years there. So within this entire footprint, Ohio State's almost had carte blanche to dominate everybody in recruiting and on the field. And I think that has really contributed. And of course, Urban Meyer comes in and recruits nationally, and it just kind of perpetuates itself year after year after year now. In a big year, they'll have 8 or 10 guys drafted, 2 or 3 in the first round. Just some uncanny things. Well, they have 12 guys taken in the first 4 rounds, I think, in 2016 or something like that. So just some kind of crazy number. And, no school can say they've had more first-round draft picks than Ohio State. So they've got a laundry list of things that they can show a high school kid and his mom and dad and say, if you come to Ohio State, this is what, if you avail yourself of everything we're going to give you educationally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, football-wise, etc., you have the opportunity to be where Joey Bosa and Ezekiel Elliott and Michael Thomas are if you just let us do our thing for you over the next 3-4 years. So I think it's just something that one brick on top of another brick on top of another brick, all the way back to John Cooper and Eddie George. I mean, it just has been one thing on top of another that has built this thing to where, it's reached this fever pitch, and played for the national championship just 18 months ago. And, odds on favorite to play for it maybe at the end of this season as well.
And just look at the coaches. We've said this before, from Woody Hayes to now at Ohio State. They're all in the Hall of Fame except for Luke Fickell, Urban Meyer, and Ryan Day. And Luke Fickell is maybe the National Coach of the Year last year. Ryan Day is going to be the National Coach of the Year at some point, and Urban Meyer will be in the Hall of Fame before too long. So they've also had a good string of head coaches to get them through this. But one other thing to keep an eye out, and this is already happening, but down the road, Columbus is growing and growing and growing. And we've seen them overtake Cleveland over the last 10 years as either the 1 or 2 spot in Ohio with Cincinnati in terms of high school talent. And it's only going to, pretty soon, it'll be the spot in Ohio if it isn't already. And it's going to be one of the best spots in the nation. And there's just all kinds of jobs coming. People are moving here, and it's spreading out from all angles. And so Ohio State is the footprint, and they have the Ohio footprint, but they're going to have a footprint within 20 miles of them that is going to be huge as well, and that's only going to help allow Ohio State to maintain what they are in the Big Ten and nationally.
Rocky, do you believe America is the land of opportunity? Columbus is the land of opportunity, and I know the people out there agree with that.